Welcome back to StrategyCast, where smart marketers and bold business thinkers share the plays behind brand breakthroughs. I'm Lori Jones, President and CEO of Avocet Communications. This week, I'm joined by Allyson Havener of Trust Radius for a conversation about the bold marketing bets that can redefine performance in 2026. From rethinking team structure to reinventing how marketing and sales share the revenue table, Allyson shares how AI, brand thinking, and customer advocacy are converging into smarter, sharper strategy for growth. Let's dive in by unpacking what it really means to make a big bet in today's B2B landscape.
A competitive edge starts with strategy, and strategy starts with knowing how to develop one. StrategyCast is a leading marketing podcast that serves up strategic insights, trends, and tips to help separate your business from the pack. Tune in weekly as host Lori Jones interviews bold marketing leaders who have priceless wisdom and are willing to share. Each episode explores cutting-edge approaches that have proven instrumental in transforming brands into industry trailblazers.
Welcome to the show, Allyson.
Hi, Lori. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh my gosh, this is like such a meaty topic, isn't it? And you've got so many tales to share along the way, I know. Before we get there, share a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, so I was the CMO at Trust Radius. We were recently just acquired by HG Insights. They're really kind of building a whole new go-to-market platform for this next era that we're all entering in. So really excited to be a part of that. I grew up in tech, and previously, before Trust Radius, I was at a company in the ad tech space called LiveRamp. So I started there when it was a 40-person company, left a few years after our IPO to take on the marketing leadership role at Trust Radius. So it's been a fun ride and really excited for where we're going in the next chapter.
Well, I tell you, this show is all about big bets in 2026. And oh my goodness, have you had some big bets just even deciding, to say yes to a CMO position with, these LiveRamp and Trust Radius and now the acquisition. I mean, those, from a marketing standpoint, from a decision standpoint, from a human standpoint, from a leader standpoint, those are some big bets that you've made along the way.
Yeah, I think honestly, the biggest bet that you can make in your career is betting on yourself. When I decided to leave LiveRamp, I had a really great position. But I really knew that I wanted to go rebuild an entire marketing function, lead the company to a successful exit. And so I think, as you go through your career, the biggest bet is that you can make is on yourself.
Yeah, well, good for you. And what a blast, right?
It's always fun. Yeah. If you're not having fun, then what are you doing?
I know. I'm talking to the team about that on Monday morning. We've got a traffic meeting, and I worked all weekend. It was a very, very long week. We had a travel week and, 80 plus, hours to just get things done. And I was like, but I loved every minute of it. And that's what matters, right? Is that you're enjoying everything along the way and instilling that in a team who is younger and growing, I think is something really, really special that we leaders can do today. We don't want them working 80 hours a week, but you get the point that, it's all about loving what you do each and every day. We're talking about big bets here, and it's not only about believing in yourself, it's helping your team to believe in them, and also making those critical big bets from a strategy standpoint and then a tactical standpoint that really can differentiate things. What would be a big bet for you when it comes to that strategic decision making?
So when I think about big bets, I think it's important to define it and what you actually mean by that. And so when I talk to my team, it's really about, okay, how are we going to reallocate our resources, time, money, focus to fundamentally change the trajectory of a business? And it's not just like the incremental improvements that you make over time. Those are also important, and it's not like a zero sum, like you are only making big bets, but you're not making incremental improvements. So I think that when you are building out your strategy, it's like, okay, here are the core fundamental things that we know are, proven it more or less. And I would also probably argue that in the next few years, the way AI is reshaping everything, those things that worked before probably are not, yielding the same. So really look at that. But it's like, what are those things that are the foundation? And then what are the big bets that really, like I said, change the trajectory of a business?
Well, and a lot of that ties into the business strategy as well, too, right? It's like, what is it that we can do to really impact what is coming down from the board and the C-level, and really following through on that from an execution standpoint through marketing. What internal and external pressures are pushing marketers to make braver, bolder decisions today?
It's really about the buyer. We are in a complete transition in terms of buyers' expectations. They're more independent. They want to self-service all the information of your product. They want to talk to their peers. They're super intolerant of fluff. They're so easy to do your homework now before you ever even talk to a vendor. And so I think that really changes because we are, as marketers and as like a go-to-market function, right? The sales team, et cetera, we are no longer the gatekeepers to information. And we can no longer, you know, create this perfect cookie cutter image of our brand and our product, et cetera. So we have to really think about meeting buyers where they are, making sure that we're giving them the information that they need to make an informed decision. We're capturing that mind share. And that's just a completely different playbook than before.
Yeah. And what we don't have control over is predictability, right? But we can get close in some situations. I think the behavioral side of what you are describing here becomes that element that, you know, we can get so far when it comes to making sure that we've got the right message at the right time on the right device, so on and so forth, to the right buyer. But then predicting whether or not they're going to choose A or B is where that gets a little loosey-goosey. How do you balance these bets with that?
So I think again, it kind of goes back to that. Okay, in your plan, you're creating like, okay, our buyers consume this type of content. Their eyeballs are on these channels, and so you're like, great, like let's make sure that that's super consistent. We know our buyers they want to know X, Y, and Z about our product. We know that we have a hard time proving ROI. So how do we get that in front of them faster, et cetera? So there's things that you already know about your buyer and that you can have those kind of always on channels. But then also leave that ability to course correct and that optionality of like, okay, layering in these big bets. And I think that also like really energizes the team, but it also helps you be that kind of bold and break through the noise in a market potentially, but you're not being reckless. It's like, I'm not spending 100% of my budget on doing all this, out of home, buying every billboard in the Bay Area, but then I don't have anything as backup in terms of actually delivering on the pipeline numbers that we need to. So I think, so again, so kind of looking at those two things of like, okay, we know that this is where our buyers are going to be. This is how they consume content. And then also, hey, how are we going to break through the noise?
Yeah. And if we even rewind that, with LiveRamp and now Trust Radius, you were able to really build these teams up. And restructuring teams quite often for that impact is something that is very, very important, from the tech and time, and let alone the team members that you've got. During our pre-show discussion, you mentioned something that I thought was really eye-opening, and I want to quote you on it. You brought up the powerful point that your team can be three, and you can still be generating, $500 million in revenue all in. Can you walk us through that mindset?
Yeah. And I just, for the record, I have not done this, but I think it's a mindset to your point. And I think it's really the line
That
between,
you go with it, okay?
yeah.
Gonna get-
I've not had a team of three and 500 million, but I think that what I'm trying to get to is the link between the impact that you have on the business and what you really need to be able to do that. And so a lot of, I would say more like if you look in the recent past, you look at like your influence as an executive, you're looking at your influence. Okay, like how big is my team? How much do I own, et cetera. And I think, again, with AI has really shown us that you can have an output that is not directly the proportion of your team size. And so right now it's like, do you have the right skill set on your team? Do you have the right personas? And how much impact can you have and how quickly? And I think that, the measurement of how influential and how you're really kind of, again, changing a business, it should be on those like bottom line results, regardless of how big your team is. Because I think that that's how a lot of organizations, you see this like kind of bloatedness that happens. Swim lanes get murky, priorities get unclear, and it causes a lot of friction. So I think that my whole kind of idea as a leader is to think about how much impact am I having, and do I have the right team, the right size, to continue that and to scale it. But yeah, I think the future is having a team of 3 and getting to that 500 million in revenue.
Well, and certainly AI and tech can help us get there, right? Are you thinking through any structural changes right now that you might be having with enhanced tech or AI at the table?
Yeah, so I think honestly, where a lot of people have been leaning in, and I think the tip of the spear has been new logo, right? Outbounding. You see a lot of the tools that are out there that can help you prioritize account lists. They can use your first party data. They can use third party data from, whatever provider. They can also, scour the internet, and they're giving you an account, like a prioritized list of accounts to go after, maybe even the personas to go after, the messaging, et cetera. And so like that's huge, right? 85% of your sales organization, they're spending 85% of their time doing that work. And if you can automate a lot of that, that just opens up so much time for them to be much more consultative, really focus on customer relationships, et cetera. So I think like new logo, like that's a duh, and that makes a lot of sense. But where we're starting to focus is on the customer. So I don't think there's a tech company out there, and I'm sure there are, but there a lot of tech companies right now are really struggling with churn. We work with a lot of tech companies. We hear it from our customers all the time. They really want to mitigate churn risk. They really want to grow the base. NRR is really becoming a kind of the standard of which you measure SaaS by. So how do you use kind of that same framework for outbounding, but think about how you start to mitigate churn? It's really, really hard to do because there's so many different churn reasons that can happen. But we're starting to kind of get to just start to uncover a lot that's on the surface where it's like, great, what are we seeing going on across these accounts, and using AI to do that? We use a tool called 4x4. And then we go to the CSM that then goes to the customer to start to validate this. So it's looking at all of like a lot of our historical data within our CRM. It's looking at a lot of calls and notes and emails, et cetera, and surfacing up all these churn reasons. And then we're building content to try to be like, okay, great, we're seeing this across all of our customers. They don't know about, whatever use cases. So how do we build playbooks for them? And then how do we do this? So we're making a lot of more like data-driven decisions that I think are more accurate than they've ever been in any previous era of marketing. But we're also doing it as a go-to-market unit. So not only is like the CSM engaging with these customers, but we're also seeing the commonalities and the patterns across customers. So marketing can be that overlay, can be that air cover, and try to mitigate some of that before it even becomes, a quote or a churn risk or even a conversation with the CSM.
Well, what I love about this is it's a very unique way of listening to your clientele and figuring out very succinctly what are better ways to either listen more in-depthly because you're asking, a different set of questions, and really turn a lot of that into advocacy for them.
Right, exactly. And we advocated for this a lot. It would, and a lot of our customers, like if you look at reviews, right, not necessarily churn risk, but I mean, you could look, you could probably find some churn risk in there for sure. But also from a product standpoint, if you really think about your listening to your customers, we've done a really, and like the 4x4 tool is really interesting because it breaks it down into departments. And so again, you're all aligning around what the customer needs, the journey that you want them to, this maturity curve, so they really find value from your product. So product is aligning to that, marketing is aligning to that, the CS team is aligning to that, and it's all in service of the customer. And this is just a huge effort because if you look at the cost of churn, you can't outrun churn just adding new logos because you're essentially just kind of getting into that hamster wheel that nobody wants to be in.
I love this discussion on many different levels, but if you think through AI and where we were 2 years ago and thinking that it was going to be disruptive to everything that marketers do day in and day out, and there were individuals out there even stating that it was going to replace our industry. And we all know that the human intellect is still very, very important piece of that. And that because of AI, we are far more efficient. We're just getting more done with more capabilities than we ever have before. But this kind of intel that 4x4 provides takes it to a totally different level because operationalizing those 4 departments and ultimately the missteps, in quotes, that people didn't even realize were happening along the way, the time cost associated with that, and then ultimately figuring out, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months down the line that was the issue is this intel provided now by this 4x4 AI tool is far surpasses, I think, any type of human intellect and the quickness and the ability to ultimately figure out what it is that might be happening.
And I think you make a really good point around the human intellect piece of this is because it's not always right. Right. And so our CSM, it just opens up the conversation for our CSM to go to the customer and be like, hey, are you experiencing this, and this issue? Are you, are you not realizing value from this, and this feature of the product? And it just really opens the conversation and then we can validate it and to your point, get ahead of it. And then we realize, hey, we're losing customers, like the ones that didn't do the full implementation and didn't see value in the first 90 days and didn't operationalize the data, right? They didn't operationalize our product and et cetera. It's in the first like 90 days. And you can see that if you're somebody that like geeks out on a lot of, customer management, CS type content, you lose customers in implementation.
Absolutely.
And it is really hard to get them back. And so if you're really thinking about that, like how do we make that like one of our KPIs is always about the time to like that you're like fully up and running. And when I first started at Trust Radius, it was like, it was over 90 days, which again, it wasn't our product to get up and running was actually pretty seamless, but also if it took 90 days, we're like, something's wrong, right? We don't have that engagement, we don't have that champion. And so our KPI was just trying to get that down into from implementation to realizing value. And we got it down to around like that 30, 45 day mark. And that really helped in terms of in making our customers more successful, totally increase our retention rates. But again, I think it's kind of like looking at that customer journey where you're finding like an AI can totally help you do this is assess the customer journey and be like, where are we really falling short? How do we get ahead of that for future customers so we're not just selling churn?
Well, and that's such a big win, right? There's ERPs. There's not a single ERP that is implemented, I think, seamlessly. There's always issues along the way and the horror stories, quite frankly. My son is involved in implementing a system for his employer, and they've been paying it for a whole year. And many, many people, finally, they gave him the project and just said, you've got to get it done. And he did. But people just give up along the way. And so what you're talking about is really operation. And by the way, sometimes they choose not to pay for the implementation team as well. They didn't in this situation, but sometimes that does happen. So operationalizing that along the way and creating success from start. They're buying impact. They're buying, how is this going to make my life easier? And if all it is making their lives more difficult, then it's not going to succeed long term for them. When you were going through all this and having these epiphanies with the customers and really determining that you had to operationalize this in a different way, talk about what the first step was, as an internal team in getting there.
So the first thing that we did is couple things. We defined what the customer journey should be. And we did it all the way from like pre-sale, like the first brand touch, the way we go through contract negotiations. Because if you also think about it, when you are selling to a new logo or even trying to sell expansion into your customers, you're setting expectations of what success will be. Those need to be communicated and codified to the CS team. So when we go back and be like, hey, this is how you said you were going to measure success. Here's how we're essentially performing to those metrics. Hey, have things changed? Right. So like we wanted to define the customer journey from the first brand point all the way through the sales cycle, implementation or post-sale implementation, all the way to advocacy. And I think what we really started to change our minds around, and I know if you look on LinkedIn, if I see another post that says the funnel's dead, it's like, oh God. But it's not about the funnel. It's just about however you want to describe your engagement cycle with buyers and customers. But we really thought about it as like a flywheel. So we're like, great, like then, post-sale implementation, we retain them, we grow them, and we turn them into an advocate. And then now our best customer is getting our next best customer, right? And we're showcasing these advocates to the market, and they're like our mouthpiece, and we're really showcasing all the impact that they had and how successful they were using Trust Radius, et cetera. So we really changed again this, and it's all about mindset change, but it was about creating this flywheel of engagement. Then from there, what we did is we defined we call them like the moments that matter. Like what are across the journey at each of these like engagement stages, what are the moments that matter, and what do we want the customer to think or feel at this stage? And that is like really powerful. And so I'm like, okay, great, at implementation, if they're not super pumped up and ready to like execute and they're already feeling like this is a slog, like that's a red flag, right? So then from there, what we created is like what were like the positive flags along the way, and then what were the red flags along the way. So like if they were thinking and feeling the way we wanted them to at that stage in the journey, great, green flag, we're seeing a lot of positivity. If we see red flag, what is the action plan from there? So we really, like I said, it was all kind of like across this engagement model that we are trying to create a flywheel to not only retain our customers, but also grow the base. And then from there, we started to flag, okay, what are the moments that matter? And then from there, what are like the red flags? And what are like the positive flags, if you will. And it really helped us get organized because the whole organization laddered into that.
Now, did 4x4 provide you that intel, or did you use a different system?
We did that all on our own, and it was like the collective consciousness of Trust Radius. So we all got together very cross-functionally, and we got a lot of that from our CSM team. We did a lot of like close loss analysis as well. And so this was when we did this project and kind of iterated on it. It was before we had any kind of like any AI tool to really help us. It was definitely just like the collective, hey, what are we already hearing from our customers in close loss interviews, close won interviews, and then how are we applying that?
I love that. You mentioned, really, we're talking about voice of the customer as well right now. And you mentioned a moment ago that the sales intel And all this intel really is what led to you being able to take that and create some incredible marketing campaigns as well. We are an agency that believes that the best sales team isn't necessarily the sales and the marketing team, but it's your customers and what they're saying about you, and ultimately what they're doing to create the referrals and the inbound leads and, PWAM, the positive word of mouth, all that sort of stuff. How did you or did you orchestrate, an actual program with customers to help them become more a part of, this is going to sound really rudimentary, but more of the sales, initiative?
Yes. So we created a customer spotlight program, and like any good marketer, we love to rebrand things. And so our classic case study, everyone kind of gets very scared of that. But what we decided to do was call them customer spotlights, and we made it really about the person versus like the company. And I think, everybody loves to put the logos on their website. Everybody loves to flash the logo on, like, this company did this. We decided to take a little bit of a different angle and make it really about the person. Here's this person that is in, director of demand gen. This is the program that she launched across her team, and these are the results that she drove, and it was really about them. And then what we decided to do is and again, any good marketer, one piece of content is 10 pieces of content. So we had like the bare minimum of this customer spotlight, and then we promoted that for about 2 months. And so it'd be kind of across social. We usually did, if they wanted to do some kind of video interview, so we had the video interview. We then, put that into social snippets. It was in, the top frame of all of our newsletters. If they wanted to do like some type of webinar or something along those, they wanted to present at one of our company town halls, or like, so like an internal, or if they wanted to come to our sales kickoff, like we made this really cool program. And then we kind of gave them like a menu of all the ways that we could activate the story or the spotlight, if you will. And they kind of got to pick almost like from like a menu, if you will. And it was great. And we made a lot of really good relationships. And I think people really leaned into it because it was about them and not necessarily the logo that was behind them. And we even had a few of our customers that said that when they were looking for a new job, that they use the customer spotlight as part of the interview process. And I was like, that's amazing, because that's essentially third-party validation that you're really good at your job.
How are you using those components to measure new business acquisition or interest flows, that sort of thing?
We look at it from a consumption standpoint. One of the strategies that I thought was a big bet, if you will, to kind of bring this full circle, was around our content strategy. We have a lot of big competitors in the space, and if you think about it, you have to be top of mind. You have to be relevant for Trust Radius, right? We have to be relevant with buyers, and vendors have to believe that buyers are coming to Trust Radius and making a technology decision. They're using that information. They're reading reviews. They're looking at product feedback. They're looking at, the demos that are on your product page, and they're making a decision. And so with that, we really leaned into brand. So I was like, hey, we really need to lean into content consumption. People need to pick up what we're putting down, and we will see our inbound increase. And it worked. And so a lot of our content, especially around the customer spotlights, was all about consumption. How much is this getting shared and engaged with on social? How many video views? How many, like, 'cause we would always create them into like a nice like web page, and we had a whole section on our website that was just customer stories. How much traffic are we getting to those, et cetera. So it was all the metrics that we looked at were all based on like consumption.
Yeah. And in our pre-show, I recall you talking about the word attrition. I'm sorry, attribution. And and the fact that that has really been a long time hot button topic. Why did you decide to eliminate that kind of language?
I decided to eliminate attribution because I don't think, and I think there's two buckets of attribution. I think there's attribution in terms of looking at a campaign and the metrics of that campaign to see if people are picking up what you're putting down. Again, looking at those consumption metrics. And I think there's a lot of people in the industry that say that it's vanity. It doesn't matter if it doesn't end to close one. And I really don't agree with that. I think that if you believe in the 95-5 rule, right, that only 95% of your people are not in market and only 5% are, if you only focus on those performance metrics, you're only capturing 5% of your TAM.
It's not going to work long term.
Right. It's not a long-term strategy. So what happens with attribution is it creates a lot of finger pointing at the C-suite, at the sales manager role. You hear this all the time and it drives me nuts, but it's like, what is the pipeline that we're going to get from marketing? And I actually said this the other day in a meeting, and you kind of get a little bit of mixed reaction there, but I was like, pipeline, who opens an opportunity? And the sales leader looks at me and they're like, the AE. I'm like, okay, so that's pipeline. So marketing is not opening opportunities. You are. What marketing is doing is priming the market to understand our value prop. So when either they come to us directly, or when our SDR or AE knocks on their door, somebody answers it. And then if we're doing really well, once they enter the sales cycle, the velocity increases because they already know our value prop. They already understand us. And we're just making the sales job much easier. Right. And they looked at me and, they were like, yeah, you're right. And so this whole notion of like, I'm going to expect 10 million of pipeline from marketing, I'm like, that's not how it really works at all. And I was like, and that also is not how buyers buy. They do not see one thing in marketing and then they convert, right? It was the culmination of a consistent brand message, consistent brand touches that made them A, trust our brand, and B, be a brand that they want to align themselves in their career to. So I think when you get into the messiness of attribution, you have to separate the two. You have to separate like attribution in terms of, okay, how am I measuring impact of a campaign and how is that attributing to these bottom funnel metrics? And then there's the attribution where I think it leads to a lot of finger pointing of marketing created this opportunity, this came from marketing. And it's like, that's just not, you're just in this like hand-to-hand combat that you're never going to win because marketing doesn't open pipeline. They don't create an opportunity.
And I think what happens here is that a lot of people take the mindset of retail marketing and some situations even CPG or some product, and they equate it to B2B marketing. And there isn't any, they're completely different. So let's take 7-Eleven and their free Slurpee on 7-Eleven. There's no way that's going to happen without marketing and advertising driving it. It's a 100% equivocated to what advertising and marketing has done. You can't translate that, especially when you've got a 6-month buying cycle or a 12 or 18-month buying cycle, and you need to interact with a buyer 26 times to get to that that point of sale. You can't equivocate the two together. And I think that's where a lot of people, they try to take those fundamentals of retail, apply them to B2B, and it doesn't work that way.
Yeah, it's that performance-based marketing, which again, I'm not saying that we should not be looking at bottom funnel metrics. I totally agree. I think that and again, like I've always sold to the enterprise. So I think that's another like caveat. Like if you sell to SMB and you have a very kind of, to your point, transactional business where you're just kind of churning and burning and it's all about volume and you have a really quick sales cycle, you're running a very different playbook than I am. I've always have been the enterprise sales, selling to the Fortune 1000. And so it's very different. So definitely understand like your buyer and the sales cycle. And like, again, but I do think that there is still, regardless of who that audience is, there is that investment in gaining mind share of your buyers because and being trusted is really, really important. So yeah, so I think that's a really good point. Is like your sales cycle, what, size company that you're selling to is very, very important when you're building this out and setting KPIs and cross functionally.
Yeah, I love that. So you've made a huge cultural shift within the organization with sales and really that boardroom dynamic now, which like that is a big bet. So way to go. Very, very impressed. What advice do you have, or could you provide other CMOs who are trying to make this cultural shift as well?
Yeah, this is really hard to do, but I think that if you really lean into it, you can make any cultural shift that you want. One is aligning across sales, marketing, and customer success on the metrics that matter and using the exact same language. And then having your RevOps team really support that. So you're all looking at the data. Because RevOps is the only one that is not biased in this situation, right? They don't care whether or not like your numbers are more favorable to marketing, sales, or customer success. It doesn't matter. And RevOps, and like, I think I've really taught my team about that, but like we are so entrenched, no matter what, with our own biases when it comes to measuring and the metrics that matter. So you need kind of this neutral party, which is RevOps, to give you the data and populate the metrics that matter. Then sales, marketing, and customer success can all have a conversation about fixing, doubling down wherever they're seeing success. It completely changes the conversation about like, where'd you get that data? How'd you figure, how's that calculated? Blah, blah, blah. The RevOps owns that, and they own cross-functionally. So it's the same data, it's all the same metrics. And then sales and marketing and customer success can have a conversation about, like I said, where to double down and where to fix things.
I think when you've got a RevOps team within the core competency of the business, it makes all the difference in the world. But let's face facts, not everyone has RevOps teams now. And there is that infighting, if you will, between sales, customer success, and marketing. So how have you, in your previous worlds and lives, been able to level set those conversations so that, the respect in the room is there and there's not this, well, this person's not qualified. It's a bad lead. I'm not going to do anything with it. How can you take that as a win?
Yes.
It's
But I think that comes from like the field leadership and marketing and being able, so we had a go-to-market sync every week. And we purposely named it that because, again, this wasn't about marketing or the customer success team. It was about the go-to-market unit and working through, okay, what's coming downstream from product? How do we talk about this product launch? And then it's like, great, like we have enablement, we have the market launch, we have the implementation changing, blah, blah. And so we really use this like go-to-market meeting to, again, and we would always go back. And I think this isn't where we really aligned on the customer journey, where it didn't become this like finger pointing where it was like, okay, here's the customer journey. Let's say for example, we're launching this new product. How does that change the customer journey? And then what do we all need to do pre, during, and post sale to adapt now that we have like this new product coming out? Another good example is like, okay, great. Where are we seeing some of our conversion rates like in pre-sales not going well? And okay, great. We're not getting the right persona in there. Okay, SDRs, you need to make sure that it's these and these personas. If it's not these personas, then you need to go and have a conversation with the AE and figure out how to get to the right person. So we use this like go-to-market meeting every week, and it was only an hour, so it was super concise. We had like a running agenda, and it was just to surface these things that were going either right or wrong or coming down the line in the customer journey, and it really helped the conversation. Again, so it's like us keep moving as a unit and not as these individual departments.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. You are amazing. You've shared so many incredible insights with us today. We could talk actually for another hour, but we're out of time. Before we say our goodbyes for the day, we launched this incredible series at the beginning of the year called Better At. And this is really to help marketers sharpen their everyday skills, not like this content hasn't already done that really make a big difference. Something that they kind of go back to, each week, each month, each year, as they're planning, as they're thinking, just something that's really helped them. What's one thing that you've learned to be better at that's made a measurable difference in how you lead, work, and show up in your role?
Ruthless prioritization, just ruthless and ruthless execution. Early in my career, I can get a lot of things done. I remember, early in my career just being a complete workhorse. However, as you get more senior in your career, your teams are bigger, your responsibilities bigger, everything's bigger, right? You have to ruthlessly prioritize, and that actually the more you say no, that gives you more space to say yes to the things that are going to have an impact and have an impact faster. And that's really what I push to my team, because it's really easy, especially on marketing, to run in circles and feel like you are just getting pulled in a million directions. And so I think ruthless prioritization will help you, be a better leader and give your team clarity and focus. So I will constantly think about that.
I absolutely love it. What is the best way for our audience to get in contact with you?
Reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active and would always love to talk shop. So
And I'd love to talk shop too. You can find me on LinkedIn as well, Lori Sartorius Jones. Allyson, thank you so much for your appearance on StrategyCast.
yeah, thank you so much for having me.
That's a wrap. Thanks for joining us on today's show. We hope your strategic brains are spinning with new ideas and bold inspiration that will elevate your strategies and marketing know-how.